What if you were sentenced to life in prison for something your twin did, and you took the fall willingly? They say the truth will set you free. But what if telling the truth means losing the only person you've ever truly loved? The gavel slammed down with a cold finality that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Guilty, the judge declared, his voice void of emotion. Sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I didn't flinch. The courtroom was dead silent. The audience, mostly strangers, a few distant relatives, one or two journalists, watched me, a 24-year-old black woman with pressed lips and empty eyes, get hauled away in handcuffs. But not her. Zaria wasn't there. Not in the pews. Not in the hall. Not anywhere. Funny thing about twins, they say you can feel when the other one is near. But that day, all I felt was a void. The same kind you feel when you know something inside you has died. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The narrator's voice cut in over the video clip on screen, pulling the viewers in like a true crime docuseries. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Cut to the next shot, an old Polaroid photo of two little girls, identical in every way except the eyes. One smiled wide, dimples flashing like mischief. The other had a more subtle expression, eyes deeper, like they'd already seen too much. That was us. Imani and Zaria. I was the quiet one. She was the wild one. But we were each other's whole world. Back in those Atlanta summers, we were inseparable. We shared everything, clothes, secrets, dreams, fears. I'd tell her when boys were trouble. She'd dare me to climb trees or sneak out at night. We balanced each other. I was the brakes. She was the gas. But on that day, June 17, 2017, none of that mattered anymore. The brakes had failed. The crash was unavoidable. "You good?" the bailiff asked as he guided me down the back hallway. He was young, probably no older than me, maybe a little older. He didn't say it like a cop. More like someone who knew what injustice felt like. His name tag read Daniels. I nodded. "Yeah. You shouldn't be in here," he whispered, low enough no one else could hear. "They know it too." I looked up at him. I wanted to say something, thank you, maybe, but my throat closed. So I just kept walking. Let's back up. Because this story doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts in a basement, 3 years earlier, with a party, a man named Marcus, and a bad decision that turned into a nightmare. But we'll get there. For now, just know this, I didn't commit the crime. But I confessed to it. Voluntarily. Why? Because Zaria was crying. Because I couldn't watch her get swallowed by a system that was never going to show her mercy. Because when we were little, I promised I'd always protect her. And because some part of me thought I could handle it. That I was stronger. That I could survive. Turns out, surviving isn't the same as living. They processed me like I was cattle. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Strip search. Orange jumpsuit. Cell Block D, Fulton County Correctional. The walls smelled like bleach and metal and sweat. Every clank of a cell door closing felt like someone was slamming a lid on a coffin. My coffin. The cell was 6 by 9, barely enough space to think, let alone breathe. My cellmate, a woman named Trina with deep-set eyes and tattoos that told stories, just looked me over once and said, "First time?" I nodded. "Don't try to be tough," she warned. "Just be smart." That night, I stared at the ceiling, letting the tears slide quietly down my cheeks, where no one could see. I didn't sleep. I listened. To the screams. The slamming. The silence between them. Zaria didn't call that first week. Or the second. It wasn't until the third week that I got my first letter. No return address. Just her handwriting. I knew it anywhere. Imani. I can't breathe. I can't think. I don't know what to say. I didn't ask you to do this. I swear I didn't. But I know I let you. And I'll never forgive myself for it. It went on like that. Page after page of guilt, confusion, love, regret. She said she was trying to get her life together. That maybe someday she'd find a way to fix things. But we both knew it was too late. Truth is, I didn't expect to be forgiven. Not by her. Not by the world. Not even by myself. But somewhere deep down, I believed that maybe, just maybe, something good could still come from it. Maybe one day someone would see what really happened. Maybe someone would care enough to ask the right questions. Maybe someone like you. Because now, you're watching. You're listening. And the story is just beginning. They say twins share a soul. From the outside, that's what we looked like, mirror images of the same girl. Same big brown eyes, same honey-toned skin, same coiled curls our mama twisted tight every Sunday night. We even had the same dimple in the left cheek when we smiled. But inside? We couldn't have been more different. I was the one who always came home before curfew. Zaria was the one who dared the storm to strike her. We were born 6 minutes apart. Mama said Imani came first, calm and quiet like the eye of a hurricane, and then came Zaria, fists balled, lungs screaming, ready for a fight. That was the story we'd tell anyone who asked. I used to laugh every time Mama said it, but the older I got, the more I realized, she wasn't kidding. We grew up on the south side of Atlanta. Not the worst block, but not the best either. The kind of neighborhood where everybody knows everybody, and front porches served as both community centers and confessionals. Kids played double dutch on the sidewalks. Grandmas hollered from windows. And if you stayed in your lane, you were usually all right. Mama worked 2 jobs. Nursing assistant by day, waitress by night. Daddy? He left when we were 7. Said he had to find himself, whatever that meant. We didn't hear much from him after that, except the occasional birthday card with a check that always bounced. So Mama became everything. Protector. Provider. Disciplinarian. And when she was too tired to play all those roles, I stepped in. Especially for Zaria. Even back then, she had this fire in her. A wildness. She couldn't sit still. Couldn't follow rules. She was the kind of girl who'd jump in the deep end before learning to swim. But she was magnetic. People gravitated toward her, especially boys. She got her first kiss at 12 behind the bleachers from a boy named Trey. I got my first kiss 2 years later at a church lock-in, awkward, fumbling, and forgettable. Zaria's life was a movie. Mine was a blueprint. I kept my head down, studied hard, made Mama proud. Zaria? She wanted more than what the block could offer. She wanted fast, shiny, dangerous things. And sometimes, she got them. But no matter how different we were still a team. Every birthday, every heartbreak, every scraped knee, we went through it together. We used to lay in bed at night and whisper dreams into the dark, pretending we were older, freer, somewhere far away. We'll move to New York, Zaria would say. I'll be a fashion designer, you'll be a lawyer. And we'll live in a penthouse with a view. I'd smile, even if I didn't believe it. Deal. We had our own language, half looks, half laughs, and little phrases no one else understood. Even Mama used to say, "Y'all ain't right. Got your own little world in that head of yours." But as we got older, that world started to crumble. By high school, the divide between us widened. I got straight A's and volunteered at the library. Zaria started cutting class and hanging with older boys who drove cars they couldn't afford and smelled like trouble. She started seeing Marcus when we were 17. He was 22. Already out of high school, already dipped in the street life. Gold chain. Fast car. Empty promises. He had that smooth charm that wrapped around Zarya like a velvet rope. She couldn't see the danger because she liked the way it felt to be chosen. I warned her. He's bad news. She rolled her eyes. You sound like Mama. Maybe Mama's right. She scoffed and walked off. And I let her. I didn't chase after her that day. I should've. I know that now. Because Marcus was the beginning of the end. He pulled her into a world that had no exits. Money started showing up. New clothes. New phone. I didn't ask questions, I should have. But she was my sister. I wanted to believe she had it under control. But she didn't. And deep down, I think she knew it. I remember one night, she came home late, eyes red, hoodie damp from the rain, mascara running like she'd been crying. She didn't say a word. Just climbed into my bed and curled up next to me like we were 10 years old again. I'm scared, Monty, she whispered. Of what? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I held her tight that night, tighter than I had in years. And in my heart, I knew, something bad was coming. I could feel it. It wouldn't happen yet, not for another 2 years. But the seed had already been planted. And it was growing, quietly, beneath the surface. Looking back, I can still see those moments where things could have gone differently. Where a different word, a different choice, might have changed everything. But life doesn't give do-overs. Only consequences. We were two of a kind. Until we weren't. And by the time I realized how far she'd fallen, it was already too late to pull her back. People always want to know, did you know? Did you see it coming? And my answer's always the same. Yes. But I lied to myself about it. It didn't start with the crime. Or even with Marcus. It started long before that, when Zarya and I were just kids, watching our mama fold towels in the living room while the world kept falling apart outside. Mama used to say we were gifts from God, but I think sometimes she wondered if she had the strength to open them. Raising twin girls by herself wasn't easy. Raising us was damn near a full-time war. She did her best, but life wore her thin. I remember nights when she'd come home from the hospital with aching feet, sit down on the couch, and just cry. Not loud. Just soft little sobs into her hands while the TV played in the background. I'd go to her. Hold her. I was 8 years old and already trying to be a woman. Zarya didn't like those nights. She'd disappear into our room, crank up the music in her headphones, pretend the world didn't exist. That was the thing about Zarya, she always ran from pain. Me? I ran toward it, tried to fix it. That difference between us, it never changed. And it mattered more than I realized. High school brought it into sharp focus. While I was neck-deep in textbooks and college dreams, Zarya was drowning in secrets. She started lying more. Hiding things. She'd come home smelling like someone else's cologne, eyes red, phone screen lighting up with names she wouldn't explain. I asked her once, just once, if she was in trouble. She looked at me like I was a stranger. You wouldn't understand. And maybe she was right. I lived in a world of plans and predictability. She lived moment to moment, like every second might be her last. But there was something else under it all, something deeper. Zarya didn't just want freedom. She wanted control. She wanted to feel powerful, like the world didn't get to decide what happened to her anymore. And Marcus? He gave her that feeling. At first. He had her wrapped around his finger. A grown man whispering into a teenage girl's ear about how different she was, how she wasn't like the others. He made her feel seen. Chosen. Like all the chaos inside her finally had a place to go. And I hated him for it. Because every time he called, every time she smiled at a text or snuck out the back door, I saw her slipping further away from me. One night, I confronted her. "You think he loves you, Z?" I asked. "You think he's gonna save you?" She snapped. "You don't get it, Imani. You always think you're better than me just because you got your little GPA and your perfect little life. That's not what this is." "No," she spat. "Then what is it? You mad 'cause I stopped asking you for permission to live my life?" "I'm mad 'cause you're acting like it's not gonna blow up in your face." Silence. Then she said something that still echoes in my bones. "You don't protect me, Imani. You control me. There's a difference." And she walked out. That was the first time I felt the shift, the space between us turning into a canyon. But I couldn't chase her. Not that time. I had finals, college interviews, deadlines. I told myself she'd come back around. She always did. But Marcus had other plans. At first, it was little things. Zaria getting dropped off late at night in cars with tinted windows. Her suddenly having cash when Mama didn't even have bus fare. Then came the real red flags. One day, I found a gun in her closet, wrapped in a t-shirt from our 8th grade class trip to Savannah. I held it like it was radioactive. When she came home, I was waiting. "What is this?" I asked, trembling. Zaria froze. Then her face went blank. "None of your business." "None of my, Z, are you crazy? What are you doing with a gun?" She snatched it from me like it was hers by birthright. I said, "It's not your business." "That's not who you are," I whispered. "You don't know who I am." I remember wanting to scream. To cry. To beg her to tell me the truth. But instead, I said nothing. Because deep down, I knew. And I wasn't ready to face it either. Later that week, Mama got a call from the school. Zaria had skipped out on her finals. Again. She just shrugged when Mama asked her about it. That night, Mama cried on the porch. Said she was losing her baby and didn't know how to stop it. I didn't tell her about the gun. I told myself I was protecting Zaria. But I was protecting me, from what I already knew. From what was coming. The lies got heavier. Zaria started disappearing for whole weekends. She'd come back hollow-eyed, quiet. Something in her was breaking. And one day, she broke it wide open. "I think I messed up," she told me. Real bad. She didn't say what she meant. She didn't have to. I looked in her eyes and saw it. The panic. The fear. The knowing. And in that moment, I wanted to believe she could fix it. That she'd come clean. That maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. But I was wrong. Because some mistakes can't be fixed. And some love is so deep, it'll bury the truth just to keep the other person breathing. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because I was walking home from campus, earbuds in, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. I almost didn't answer. But something, call it instinct or that twin thing again, told me to pick up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then a shaky voice I hadn't heard in days. "It's me. Z." A pause. "I need you." Those 3 words froze my whole body. When I got to the address she sent, a crumbling apartment complex on the edge of the city, she was waiting outside, hoodie up, arms crossed, eyes bloodshot and distant. She didn't hug me. She didn't even look at me. She just said, "We don't have much time." I followed her up a staircase that reeked of weed and mildew. The hallway light flickered like something out of a horror movie. And in that moment, I knew, this wasn't just about Marcus. The apartment was trashed. Chairs overturned. Blood on the floor. I stopped cold. What the hell is this? Zarya didn't answer. She walked over to the kitchen sink, started scrubbing her hands like she could wash off whatever happened. "I need you to listen, and I need you not to freak out," she said, voice shaking. "There was a deal. Marcus set it up. I didn't even want to go but..." She trailed off. I waited. My heart was already racing. We were supposed to just deliver something. In and out. But he brought a gun. And when they started arguing, she swallowed hard. One of them pulled out theirs. There was yelling, then someone pushed someone, and the gun went off. "Zarya," I whispered, already knowing. "He's dead," she said. "One of them." And they ran. They all ran. Except me. My mouth went dry. "You stayed." I froze. She was pacing now, eyes darting to the door like she expected it to burst open any second. "I didn't shoot him, Imani. I swear to God, I didn't. But my prints are everywhere. The neighbors saw me running out. The cops are gonna come for me, and I grabbed her shoulders. "Did anyone see your face?" She blinked. "I don't know. Did you leave anything behind? Anything with your name?" "No." That's when the silence between us shifted. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. I was her mirror. Her double. I had a clean record. No priors. No street ties. She was asking without asking. And I was already answering. "I can say I was here," I whispered. "You run. You leave tonight. Go somewhere no one knows your name." "Imani, no. You said it yourself. They didn't see your face." "You can't," her voice cracked. "This is my mess." I looked at her, really looked at her, the girl I shared a womb with, a bedroom, a whole life. She was broken. Terrified. The wildness in her wasn't fire anymore. It was ashes. "You do it for me," I said. She didn't answer. Because she knew I was right. The rest of that night was a blur. I cleaned what I could. I stayed behind. I waited. And sure enough, 2 hours later, the police showed up. There was no fight. No screaming. Just cold steel on my wrists and a detective reading me my rights like it was just another Tuesday night on the job. "Name? Imani Rhodes. You know why you're being arrested?" I nodded. Yes. And that was it. The funny thing about being a twin. People assume they know which one you are. But the world doesn't look too closely. They see brown skin, curly hair, and a record clean enough to believe. They don't look for the story. They just look for a name. And I gave them mine. In the holding cell that night, I sat on a hard bench, staring at my reflection in the scratched-up metal panel on the wall. I looked calm. I wasn't. I kept thinking, maybe it'll all get sorted out. Maybe she'll come forward. Maybe this is just temporary. But then I remembered the blood on the floor. The look in Zarya's eyes. And I knew, she wasn't coming back. At least not yet. At the arraignment, my public defender barely looked at me. Young white guy, fresh out of law school, already beaten down by the system he was supposed to believe in. "You should consider a plea," he said. I didn't do it. He shrugged. "Doesn't matter if they think you did." That's when it hit me. This wasn't going to go away. Zarya hadn't just asked me to lie. She'd asked me to disappear. And the worst part? I let her. Because I loved her. Because I couldn't stand to watch her rot in a cage when I still believed she had a chance to change. Because I thought I could handle the weight. But I didn't realize how heavy lies become when you carry them alone. They sat me in a beige room with bad lighting, a tape recorder blinking red on the table, and 2 detectives who smelled like stale coffee and last week's cigarettes. Detective Harlan was the older one. Balding. Heavy-set. His tone said, "I've heard it all," but his eyes were sharp, watching every breath I took. Detective Lynn was younger, quieter. She played the good cop, nodding like we were girlfriends chatting over brunch. Neither one of them believed a word I hadn't yet said. "This is your chance to get ahead of this," Harlan said, pressing record. "Tell us what happened." I sat still. My palms were sweating under the table. My heartbeat was in my throat. I wanted to scream the truth. But I said something else. "I was there." Harlan leaned forward. "Go on." "I met Marcus around 9 p.m. at the apartment on Bankhead. He said we needed to handle a delivery." "What kind of delivery?" I hesitated. "Money. I thought it was just a drop." Lynn's voice was gentler. "Were you carrying anything?" I nodded. "A backpack." Harlan jumped back in. "You armed?" "No." "Was Marcus?" "Yes." "Did you see the gun go off?" I paused. This was the moment. The line. The point of no return. "Yes." Lynn looked at me carefully. "Did you fire it?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Yes." The room fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. I had just sentenced myself to life. They asked a few more questions. Some I answered. Some I deflected. I gave them just enough to build a story that held together, barely. Not enough to implicate anyone else. Just enough to keep them from digging deeper. By the time I left that room, I wasn't Imani Rhodes anymore. I was offender number 782114. They booked me, fingerprinted me, and tossed me into a holding cell with 6 other women, all of us wearing the same orange, all of us pretending we weren't scared out of our minds. Some paced. Some prayed. I sat in the corner, back against the wall, replaying everything in my head like a broken tape. This wasn't a movie. There was no dramatic music, no slow fade to black. Just concrete floors, flickering lights, and the reality of what I'd just done. They gave me one phone call. I called Zaria. No answer. I tried again. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Because what do you even say? "Hey, just wanted to let you know I lied to the cops and confessed to murder so you could run away. Hope you're doing well." No. I just hung up. The next day, they brought me to the arraignment. The judge looked at me like I was nothing more than paperwork in a robe. The prosecution asked for no bail. The public defender beside me didn't argue. Mama was in the back row, clutching her purse so tight her knuckles turned white. She locked eyes with me for a second. I'll never forget that look. Not anger. Not disappointment. Just heartbreak. Like she saw something in me crack and wasn't sure if it could ever be put back together. After the hearing, she tried to talk to me, but the guards pulled me away. Still, I heard her voice behind me. "Imani, please, baby, tell me what's really going on." I didn't answer. Because if I looked at her too long, I'd unravel. And I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not when I had to become someone else entirely, someone who could survive this place, this lie, this new life I'd chosen. Back in the cell that night, my bunkmate Trina leaned over from the top bed. "You too pretty for this place," she said, like it was a curse. "You ain't got no business in here." I didn't respond. Because maybe she was right. But the truth is, I chose to be here. Not because I wanted to die in a cell. But because I didn't want Zaria to. What people don't understand is that love doesn't always make sense. It's not always fair. Or rational. Or safe. Sometimes love is sacrifice. Sometimes love is a lie. And sometimes love looks a lot like guilt wearing someone else's face. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Tried to block out the voices in my head, the smell of sweat and steel, the sound of a woman sobbing in the cell next door. But the worst sound of all was silence. Because Zarya still hadn't called. Still hadn't written. Still hadn't shown up. And that silence? It was louder than any prison door slamming shut. The first thing they take is your clothes. Then your name. Then the illusion that you're still a person. Prison doesn't care about the difference between guilt and love. It doesn't ask questions like, why did you do it, or, who were you protecting? It just gives you a number, a bunk, and a routine that grinds your spirit down like a dull blade. I was Imani Rhodes on the outside. In here, I was just number 782114. At first, it felt like I was watching it all happen to someone else. Like I was playing a role in some twisted documentary. Wake up at 5. Stand for count. Breakfast at 6:15. Work assignment. Yard time. More count. Dinner. Lights out. Repeat. 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 The days bled together like spilled ink. No color. No meaning. Just gray. Trina, my bunkmate, had been in for 5 years already. Armed robbery. Said she knocked over a check-cashing place with her cousin back in 19. She was blunt, funny, tough as nails, and she saw through me immediately. You ain't built for this, bookworm, she said one night. You ain't even breathe like somebody guilty. I didn't respond. I couldn't afford to. I was already holding too much. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zarya. I saw her running. Free. Breathing air I couldn't. Living a life I gave away. I'd imagine her walking down a sidewalk somewhere, maybe in Miami, maybe New York, maybe some tiny town where nobody knew her name. I'd picture her smiling, blending in, building something new. But the longer the silence stretched, the harder it became to believe she was thinking about me at all. Mama visited once a week at first. She'd sit across the scratched plexiglass and search my face like she was looking for something she'd lost inside me. Imani, baby, this isn't you, she whispered. I smiled like it didn't hurt. Maybe you never really knew me. She flinched at that. But I didn't mean it to wound her. I just didn't know how else to survive in here. Because the truth. I wasn't me anymore. I was her. I had to be. I took on Zarya's secret, her story, her shadow, and little by little, it was swallowing me whole. One afternoon, during rec, I was sitting alone on the edge of the yard when Trina came over and sat beside me. No words at first. Just silence, like she was letting me breathe in the sky. Then, soft, you ever think about what comes after this? I stared at the barbed wire. The towers. The weight of forever. No. She lit a cigarette with a lighter she wasn't supposed to have. Took a slow drag. I used to think I'd get out, start over. Open a little salon. Dye hair. Do nails. Nothing big, just something that was mine. She looked at me. But you got that look like you don't think there is an after. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure I believed there was one either. Nights were the worst. That's when the guilt crept in, slow and choking. When I'd lie in my bunk and stare at the ceiling, replaying every second of that night. Wondering if Zarya was safe. Wondering if I'd made the right choice. Wondering if she even thought about me, or if she'd buried me like the lie I'd become. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I wrote her a letter. Zarya. I don't know where you are. I don't even know if you're alive. But I need you to know something. I'm not angry. Not yet. But I'm scared. Scared that I'm losing pieces of myself every day in here. That by the time you find your way back to me, I won't be me anymore. I told myself I did this for love. But love's a heavy thing when it's only going one way. I hope wherever you are, you're free. Just don't forget who bought your freedom. Imani. I folded it, addressed it to the P.O. box she used once back when things were still almost okay. I never got a response. Weeks turned into months. I learned how to move inside. How to keep my head down. How to speak without saying anything. How to make a shank out of a toothbrush. Not because I planned to use it, but because knowing you could made you less of a target. I started lifting weights. Reading legal books in the library. Anything to keep my mind sharp. Anything to stay tethered to the version of me I was afraid I'd forget. But the truth was, every day I spent in her shoes, mine felt further and further away. And somewhere out there, Zaria was walking around in mine. It had been 147 days since I last heard Zaria's voice. I counted. Every morning, before breakfast, I would mark a tiny slash in the back of my journal, a cheap spiral notebook I got from the library cart. It was the one thing I still had control over, time. Or at least, the recording of it. Trina said I was punishing myself. I mean, damn, girl. You already locked up. You gotta keep track like you're doing it on purpose. She wasn't wrong. I just didn't know how else to keep from going numb. Counting made it real. It reminded me that the world outside was still spinning, even if I wasn't part of it anymore. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning in February, I got a letter. At first, I thought it was a mistake. No one wrote to me except Mama. And she always used blue ink. This one was scribbled in black, no return address, just my name and number, the envelope wrinkled and smudged with fingerprints. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. The paper was thin, like the kind you find in a motel Bible. Torn on one corner. The handwriting, jagged and rushed, was hers. Zaria. Imani. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I wanted to write sooner. I didn't know how. Still don't. I'm sorry. I know that word isn't enough. Not after what I let you do. Not after what I became. I left because I was scared. Not just of getting caught, but of losing you. And I think, deep down, I already had. When you looked at me that night, in that busted-up kitchen, I saw it. You weren't looking at your sister. You were looking at a stranger who broke your heart. I've been in Chicago. Working under the table at a diner. Sleeping on couches. I keep my head down. I don't use my name. I think about you every single day. And I hate myself more with every breath I take in freedom. I'm not strong like you. I don't know what to do to make this right. Tell Mama I'm alive. Don't tell her where I am. I love you. I don't deserve you. Zaria. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it up, put it under my pillow, and cried harder than I had since the night they locked that cell door behind me. The tears weren't just sadness. They were rage. Shame. Relief. Loneliness. All crashing over me at once like a wave I'd been bracing against for months. Because hearing from her proved she was real. Alive. But it also meant something else. She was still out there. Still free. Still not here. I wanted to scream. To punch the wall. To find her and ask every question that burned in my chest. Why didn't you come forward? Why did you let me carry this for you? Why did you disappear without saying goodbye? I didn't sleep that night. Trina noticed. Bad news? I pulled the letter out slowly. Let her read the last few lines. She handed it back, eyes soft for once. She got a heart, I'll give her that. That heart still beating, I said. While mine's stuck in a cage. For the next few weeks, I read that letter every night. Memorized it. Hated it. Needed it. It became a strange kind of lifeline. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That this wasn't just a story I made up to make the bars go down easier. But it didn't fix anything. It didn't shorten my sentence. It didn't make me less alone. Mama came to visit that Friday. She looked tired. Smaller. Like the weight of both our lives was resting on her shoulders. I handed her the letter. She read it in silence, her lips trembling. She didn't cry. She never cried in front of me. When she finished, she folded it neatly, tucked it into her purse, and looked at me. "I miss both my daughters," she said. "But only one of you had the courage to stay." That hurt more than anything Zarya wrote. After the visit, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, whispering her name over and over again. Zarya. 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 Until the name didn't sound like anything anymore. Just noise. Just a ghost. Just a version of me I could no longer hold on to. It started with a stare. You learn real fast in prison that eyes talk louder than words. Respect is earned in glances, not speeches. And when someone stares at you too long, that's not curiosity. That's a warning. Her name was Alicia Red Monroe. 6'1". Built like a linebacker. And according to Trina, she'd been running the North Block since the COs turned a blind eye 5 years ago. "She don't like weakness," Trina whispered one night while we cleaned trays in the mess hall. "And you? You wear yours like perfume." I didn't respond. I just scrubbed harder. Red had been watching me for weeks. Not in a flirtatious way. Not even in a territorial way. No, this was predatory. Like she could smell I didn't belong, and that made me a threat. Or worse, an opportunity. The first shove came on a Monday morning in the laundry room. I was folding sheets when her shadow blocked the light. "You think you special, Rhodes?" Her voice was slow and southern, like syrup over razor blades. "Think you better than the rest of us?" I didn't look up. "No." She knocked the pile of folded linens to the floor. "Then act like it." I didn't say anything. I picked them up, hands shaking, heart pounding. Trina pulled me aside later. "You let her punk you once, you gonna wear that target for the rest of your bid." "I'm not trying to fight." "Too late," she said. "She already decided you're in one." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over the encounter in my head, trying to figure out what I could have done differently. But the truth was, I didn't know how to be that kind of person. Not yet. By Wednesday, Red made her next move. Shower block. No cameras. No witnesses. I was toweling off, minding my own, when I felt it, a hand on my shoulder. Spun me around. Slammed me into the tiles. She leaned in close. "Say something. Scream. Let M come running." But I didn't scream. I didn't move. Because somewhere inside me, something snapped. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about survival. I don't remember throwing the first punch. Just the sound of bone hitting bone. The way the tile scraped my back as we went down. The yelling. The blood. The screaming. I fought like someone who had nothing left to lose. Because in that moment, I didn't. When the COs pulled us apart, I was bruised, bleeding, and grinning like a lunatic. Red was on the ground. Groaning. Wheezing. I won. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. But it was mine. They threw me in the SHU, solitary, for 7 days. 1 hour of light. 23 in a concrete box. At first, it was hell. But somewhere around day 3, I stopped being scared of the silence. I started listening to it. And the thing it whispered back. "You're not her anymore." Imani, the straight-A student, the big sister, the fixer, she wouldn't have survived that fight. She would have crumbled. Apologized. Tried to make peace. But the girl in that shower? She wasn't Imani anymore. Not fully. She was whoever she needed to be to make it out alive. When they let me out of SHU, I walked back into Gen Pop and the noise stopped. Not completely. But just enough. Red didn't speak to me again. She didn't have to. I was marked now. Not as a target. But as someone who fought back. Trina clapped me on the shoulder in the chow line. Told you. All you had to do was show M the storm. I nodded. Said nothing. Because something inside me was still burning. Not rage. Not pride. Something darker. Like I'd tasted a piece of power I never wanted, and now couldn't put down. That night, I stared at my reflection in the scratched metal mirror. My lip was split. My eye was swelling. But for the first time, I looked like someone who belonged here. And that scared me more than anything. It was a Thursday when the news came in. I was working in the prison library, restocking torn-up legal texts no one ever checked out, when Officer Delgado stepped in holding a yellow slip. Rhodes. You got mail. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked to the front desk, trying not to look eager. Mail usually meant a letter from Mama. Maybe a sermon clipped out of the church bulletin. Something soft to hold on to for 5 minutes. But this? This wasn't from Mama. This envelope was thicker. The paper was firmer. Professional. It came from a law office in Cook County, Chicago. My throat tightened. Back in my bunk, I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside were 2 things, a typed letter from a junior associate named Jayla Holmes and a blurry photo, grainy, black and white, like a still from a security camera. The letter read. Ms. Rhodes. I'm currently assisting with an independent review program through the Innocence Project. Your case was flagged due to multiple discrepancies in the original report and your voluntary confession. We recently received a tip from a confidential source who claims to have seen your twin sister, Zaria Rhodes, in the south side of Chicago. Enclosed is a still from a security feed dated 3 weeks ago. We believe the woman pictured may be Zaria. We are working to confirm her identity and location. If this is accurate, we may have grounds to re-examine your case. More information to come. Respectfully. Jayla Holmes, legal intern, The Innocence Project, Chicago. I didn't breathe. I looked at the photo. The quality was poor, but I knew that face. The tilt of the jaw. The slouch in her shoulders. The way her hand half covered her mouth when she walked, like she was trying not to be seen. Zaria. She was in a hoodie. Walking past what looked like a liquor store. Alone. Eyes darting like prey. The timestamp in the corner, 2:17 a.m. She was alive. Not just hiding, out in the world. Moving through it. Breathing its air. Leaving shadows I could barely touch. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was heat. Anger. Rage. A part of me had convinced myself she was gone. That maybe she couldn't come back. That maybe all this pain had a reason, even if it was a tragic one. But this? This meant she chose not to. She could have walked into any precinct in Chicago. Turned herself in. Admitted the truth. Told them who really pulled that trigger, or at the very least, who didn't. But she didn't. She vanished. And now she was spotted on tape, like some urban legend flickering in and out of grainy footage. I showed the letter to Trina that night. She read it twice and then handed it back. You ready for what comes next? I looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, if they reopen your case, she might have to stand trial. Might do time. You still good with that? You still okay watching your sister go down? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. The truth was complicated now. So much time had passed. And the more time that passed, the more I felt like I was the one who changed, not her. She ran. She stayed free. But I was the one who'd learned how to survive in hell. I was the one who carried both of us. The next few days were a blur. I kept checking for more letters. More news. Something. Anything. Then, finally, a week later, I got another envelope. No return address. Just my number. My name. And inside? A napkin. A greasy, crumpled napkin from a diner on the south side of Chicago. On it, a scribbled sentence in familiar handwriting. Some people can't afford the truth. That was it. No signature. No location. No apology. Just 7 words that hit like a sucker punch to the ribs. I stared at that napkin all night. Turned it over. Tried to find meaning in the smudges. The message was clear. Zarya knew she was being hunted, and she was still running. And maybe she was warning me. Or taunting me. Or asking me to understand something I no longer could. But that one sentence kept echoing in my head. Some people can't afford the truth. I started to wonder. Was she talking about herself? Or me? It's funny how much noise silence can make. I sat in the prison library, pretending to read a book on constitutional law, but all I could hear was the rustling of the paper, the buzzing of the overhead lights, and the thudding of my own heartbeat. That letter from the Innocence Project had done something to me. It had opened a door in my mind, and now it wouldn't close. Every time I thought about the evidence piling up, about Zarya being caught on camera, about the possibility of my case being reopened, I felt like I was suffocating in a room full of smoke. I had no idea what was real anymore. Was I really being set free, or was I just being led down another dark hallway? The clock on the wall ticked louder. 1 hour before the afternoon lockup. The library would empty soon, and I'd have to head back to my block, but I couldn't focus. Not on anything. Not on the book, not on the ticking clock, only on the words from Jayla Holmes. If this is accurate, we may have grounds to re-examine your case. The problem wasn't the case. It was Zarya. She had the power to bury me just as much as I had the power to bury her. The guilt twisted in my gut. Every part of me screamed for the truth to come out, to walk out of here free. But another part, a darker part, wondered what would happen if I didn't speak. If I just stayed quiet, kept my mouth shut, and let the past fade. It was a choice I didn't want to face. But it was coming, whether I liked it or not. That afternoon, after my shift, I was called to the warden's office. I walked the long hallway, the sound of my boots echoing off the cold concrete. My stomach tightened as I entered the room. Warden Macmillan was sitting at her desk, her glasses perched on the tip of her nose as she shuffled through paperwork. She looked up when I entered. "Have a seat, Rhodes." I did. Her office smelled like stale coffee and too many years spent in a windowless room. She set down her papers and clasped her hands together, looking at me as if I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "You've been under review for possible exoneration," she began. "And I have to say, I'm impressed by the legal team working on your behalf. They're serious about this case. It's drawing a lot of attention." My heart skipped a beat. "What's that mean for me?" "It means," she said slowly, "that you have options. The Innocence Project is willing to take your case to court. But there's a catch." Of course there was a catch. There always was. "You'll have to cooperate fully with their investigation. And that means answering questions about the night of the crime. Including the role your twin sister may have played." I didn't breathe for a second. Zarya. She was the key. The one thing I wouldn't, touch. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, so I clasped them together in my lap to hide it. Do you understand the significance of this? Warden Macmillan continued. If you speak, they'll reopen the case. If your sister's involvement comes to light, well, that could change everything. I nodded, though my mind was spinning. And if I don't cooperate? Her expression softened, just a little. If you don't, the project will likely drop the case. You'll stay where you are, and your sister's name will remain untouched. You'll continue serving your sentence without any chance of parole. I was silent for a long time. She didn't rush me. Just sat there, her cold gaze never leaving mine. There it was. The choice. The one I knew was coming but didn't know how to make. If I told them what I knew, Zaria would be caught. No more hiding. No more running. She'd be right back where I was. Behind bars. But if I kept my mouth shut, the truth would stay buried. She'd stay free. And I'd stay in prison. Forever. Think about it, Macmillan said, rising from her desk. You have time. But not much. She walked to the door, opened it, and I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. I walked back to my cell that night, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zaria's face. The way she looked in the photo. The way she had looked when we were kids, before everything fell apart. I kept asking myself the same question, what is the right thing to do? Zaria needed me. I knew that. But did I owe her my silence? Or did I owe her the truth? And if I gave up that truth, what did it make me? Was I still the sister who loved her? Or was I just a coward who couldn't do what was right? That night, in the dim light of my cell, I picked up the pen and wrote a letter to Jayla Holmes. The words came slowly, but they were clear. I'm willing to cooperate. It was the hardest thing I'd ever written. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I didn't expect it to hit me like it did. I thought I'd feel a sense of relief, even vindication, once I made my decision, once I agreed to cooperate. I thought I'd feel right. But there was no right in what I was doing. Only consequences. The first time I saw Zaria's name on a case file again, I felt like the air was sucked out of the room. I sat in the conference room, facing Jayla Holmes, the lawyer from the Innocence Project. She had an energy about her, young, driven, but there was something in her eyes that made her seem much older than she was. She wasn't just fighting for me. She was fighting for an idea, a justice that had been withheld, buried by time and corruption. And I could see how badly she wanted to win. But there was no winning for me. Not when I knew what this meant for Zaria. I'm glad you decided to cooperate, Jayla said, breaking the silence between us. She slid a stack of papers toward me. But you need to understand what you're walking into. If we can get the case reopened, it won't be easy. It won't be fast. You'll be dragged through every moment of that night. Every lie. Every shred of evidence will be examined, dissected, and held up for the world to see. I swallowed hard. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. I understand. But did I? Could I even begin to comprehend what was about to unfold? What the truth would cost me? Good, she said, nodding. Because this, she tapped the papers in front of me. This is what you're walking into. I didn't look at the papers. I couldn't. Not yet. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the chaos I knew would follow. My decision to speak up, to finally tell them what I knew, felt like an admission of guilt, but not mine. Zaria's. Zaria. The sister I had spent years protecting, hiding for. The one person I'd kept my mouth shut for, time and time again. I wanted to call her. To hear her voice. To beg her to turn herself in, to stop this madness before it reached the breaking point. But I couldn't. The truth was out there now, and once it was too late. I signed the papers. I had no choice. That night, my cell felt colder than usual. The faint hum of the lights, the low murmur of other prisoners in their cells, it all seemed distant. Like I was on the outside looking in. My mind kept drifting back to Zaria's face, the face in the security footage, the face that was now a ghost haunting me from every corner of the case. What had she been thinking when she decided to keep running? When she'd chosen silence over the truth? I sat on my bunk, staring at the wall, when the guard came by to give me the evening report. As I reached for it, a small folded note fell out from between the pages. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but I didn't need to. I knew who it was from. Imani, it read. I'm sorry. Please don't make things worse. You don't know the full story yet. But you will. Stay quiet. Please. I'll fix this, I swear. Z. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook as I crumpled the note. Zaria. She was still out there. She was still running, and she was still hiding something from me. She had sent me a warning. But it was too late. 2 weeks passed before the Innocence Project filed the formal motion to reopen my case. It was fast. Too fast. And as much as I wanted to believe that the truth would set me free, the more I watched the court battle heat up, the more I realized the truth was about to destroy everything I knew. Jayla kept pushing me for answers. She needed every detail about that night. Every memory. Every moment Zaria and I had shared. But the more I told her, the more I realized how many gaps there were, not just in my memory, but in the story I'd been telling myself all these years. I kept thinking back to the moment in the library when the letter came. When I first saw that blurry photo. It wasn't just a picture of Zaria anymore. It was proof. Proof that she'd been alive all this time. Proof that everything I had buried, every lie I had told myself about protecting her, was unraveling. And with every shred of evidence that came to light, Zaria became a bigger part of this. Every piece of footage. Every new detail. She was there, and she was linked to me in ways I couldn't outrun. The weight of her choices, the choices she'd made years ago, started to drown me. And still, she didn't speak. Still, she didn't come forward. I felt like I was being pulled in two directions. I was cooperating, yes. But my sister's silence, her decision to remain invisible, was eating away at me. I wanted to scream at her, wanted to shout into the phone line, ask her why was she doing this to us? But then, one cold morning, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from the lawyers. It was a handwritten envelope, postmarked from a Chicago address I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully. Inside was a picture, a clear, full-color image of Zaria, standing outside a liquor store. She looked older, different, but unmistakable. And on the back of the photo, written in Zaria's familiar scrawl. We're not the same anymore. I stared at the photo for a long time, the words echoing in my mind. Maybe we never were. The court hearings were set to begin in a week. The pressure was building, each day feeling like I was walking closer to a cliff with no way down. I had tried to prepare myself for this, the digging, the revisiting of every single moment that had led to my conviction. But what I wasn't prepared for was what the Innocence Project was uncovering in the process. The more they dug into Zaria's past, the more unsettling things became. Jayla Holmes was relentless. Every time we met, she brought up new leads. New witnesses. She was pulling threads in every direction, weaving them into a tapestry of possibilities I never wanted to face. I'd never imagined what the truth about Zaria might look like, but now, I couldn't escape it. I thought I had seen every part of this story, the lies, the mistakes, the shattered moments when everything fell apart. But now, with every new document Jayla handed me, the picture was shifting. Zaria's fingerprints were found on a gun that night. I couldn't process that. Zarya? The girl I had protected? The one I'd always thought of as my other half, the one I'd sworn to cover for. Her fingerprints on the murder weapon. But I didn't have time to question it, not with the clock ticking. The truth was becoming a tidal wave, and I was just waiting for it to crash over me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in my cot, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the images from the documents I'd seen. There was a mug shot of Zarya, taken not long before I was arrested. She'd been in a hold-up situation a year earlier, a crime that had been swept under the rug. A part of me had to wonder, had she been involved in something darker than I realized? But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the voicemail I found on my phone. It had been buried deep in the system, saved in an old file I hadn't checked in months. The date? The night before my trial. Zarya's voice. I can't go through with it. I can't go to trial. They'll never believe us, and it'll just get worse. I'm sorry, Imani. You're the stronger one. You've got to take the fall. I can't do it. The weight of those words hit me like a freight train. I hadn't listened to that voicemail in years, had almost forgotten it even existed. Zarya's voice was calm, almost too calm, but there was a desperation in it that sliced through me. She was apologizing, but why? I ran the message over and over in my mind. My sister had known from the beginning that she was the one who should have been there for me. She knew I was taking the fall for something I didn't do, and she let it happen. I clenched my fists. There was betrayal in her words, an unmistakable betrayal. She had chosen her freedom. She had made her peace with leaving me behind in a prison cell, while she went on to live her life. And all these years, I had carried the guilt of a crime I didn't commit, believing that somehow I was protecting her. But I wasn't protecting her. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I couldn't keep her secret any longer. The next day, Jayla came to see me, her eyes wide with determination. She had new documents in hand, but there was something in her expression that told me she wasn't just here to give me more files. You need to see this, she said, sitting down across from me. She handed me a set of papers, a timeline of the night of the crime, the evidence that had been overlooked. Her finger landed on one specific point in the timeline. A gap. There's something we missed, she said. A witness. Someone who says they saw Zarya that night. And not just that, they say they saw her leave the scene with the victim's gun in her hand. I froze. Zarya had been there. I hadn't wanted to believe it. I couldn't. It wasn't possible. But everything was pointing back to the same thing, Zarya had been involved. The witness, a homeless man who had been nearby the night of the shooting, had come forward after seeing news reports about the reopened case. His statement was chilling. He'd seen a woman leaving the scene, dragging a man's body, gun still in hand. He couldn't remember her face clearly, but he was certain of one thing, she was wearing a red hoodie. I dropped the papers onto the table. That's not Zarya. She wasn't. Jayla held up a hand. Imani, listen. I know this is hard to accept, but the truth is coming out, piece by piece. And Zarya's involvement might be more than just a coincidence. We have to be ready for that. I looked at her, feeling the walls closing in. The truth, as ugly and twisted as it was, couldn't be ignored anymore. I don't know what to do, I whispered. How do I face this? How do I face her after all these years of lying to myself? Jayla leaned forward, her voice low but steady. You have to make a choice, Imani. This is bigger than you now. It's bigger than Zarya. It's about justice. And the only way out of this is the truth. The only way out was the truth. But the truth was going to destroy everything. That night, I sat in my cell again, staring at the walls, the weight of everything pressing down on me. What would Zarya do if she knew I was ready to expose her? Would she come back and face the music? Or would she disappear again, leaving me to carry her burden? I didn't know what to do anymore. But I knew one thing, I couldn't keep living in the lie. It was time to speak the truth. The cost be damned. I didn't think it would be like this. I thought once I finally spoke up, once I took a stand and let the truth pour out, it would all make sense. That it would be a relief. But it wasn't. It was chaos. The press was already circling, vultures waiting for their next story. Once the Innocence Project filed their petition for the case to be reopened, the media ran with it. Headlines screamed about a wrongly convicted woman, and, of course, my name was splashed across the news. Imani Franklin, the woman who had been wrongly accused of a crime she didn't commit. But that wasn't the full story. Not by a long shot. The real story, the part one couldn't ignore any longer, was the one I had to face. Zaria's involvement. Zaria was the one who had made me take the fall. Zaria had been there, and the evidence was mounting. The timeline was undeniable. Every single detail pointed back to her. And now, it wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about the reckoning that was coming for her. And as much as I hated it, I couldn't back down. The phone call came in the middle of the night. I picked up, knowing before I even said hello that it was her. Zaria. Imani, she said, her voice shaking. I know what you're doing. I know you're going to tell them everything. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to say so much, but I couldn't. The weight of what I had to do hung heavy on my chest. You don't have to do this, she begged. You don't have to ruin everything. We can fix this. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. We can't fix this, Zaria. You were there. You did this, and I'm not going to carry this lie anymore. It's too late. Don't, Zaria's voice cracked. Imani, please. The tears in her voice made my heart shatter, but I couldn't let it stop me. Not anymore. You made your choice, Zaria. I made mine. This is bigger than us. She was silent for a long time. Long enough for me to wonder if she was still there. I'm sorry, she finally whispered. I never wanted this for you. I didn't want you to have to carry it all. But you're right. You're right about everything. I was there. I never knew how to make it right. I could barely hear her through the tears in my own voice. You left me, Zaria. You left me to rot in that cell while you walked free. I didn't leave you, Imani, she snapped, suddenly sharp. I was running. From them, from myself. I never knew how to stop. The words hung in the air between us, suffocating me. You had a choice, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. You chose silence. And now we both have to pay for it. The next morning, I walked into the visiting room, where Jayla was waiting for me, her face set in grim determination. I hadn't seen her look like this before. This was no longer just a legal battle for her. This was personal. I've been following the story, Jayla said, sliding a folder across the table. I know you're about to face a lot of backlash, but we're still pushing forward. The court will hear your case, and will argue the truth. But you need to be ready for what comes next. I opened the folder. Inside were the new pieces of evidence, a detailed account of Zaria's criminal history, her connections to the victim, and the shocking revelation from the witness who had seen her at the scene of the crime. There's more, Jayla continued. We've got a new angle. Zaria's involvement isn't just about the shooting. There's more to the story. She's been hiding something from you, something she didn't tell anyone. I looked up, confused. What do you mean? Jayla pulled out another piece of paper. It was a photograph. A blurred image, but it was unmistakably Zaria, standing with a man I didn't recognize. The caption on the back said, Zaria Franklin and Thomas Blake, Associates, 2017. I didn't know the name. But I recognized the face. The man in the photo had been one of the detectives who had worked on the case. He'd been involved in the investigation from the start. He was the one who'd pushed for my conviction when the evidence was thin. This wasn't just about Zarya and me anymore. It was about a much bigger conspiracy, one that went deeper than I had ever imagined. Later that day, I called Zarya again. She answered on the first ring, but this time, she sounded different. There was no desperation in her voice. No pleading. Just resignation. "You don't have to do this," she said, her tone calm. "You've already done enough, Imani. Let it go." I shook my head, my throat tightening. "No. I'm not letting it go. Not anymore. It's time for the truth to come out." Zarya sighed. "You think you're doing the right thing? That this will make everything better? It won't. I promise you, the truth is just as dangerous as the lie. And once it's out, you won't be able to stop it." I didn't know what to say. The truth was a weapon, and she was right. Once it was unleashed, there would be no going back. "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice quiet but firm. She was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked. "I know. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Imani. For everything." The next few days were a blur of media frenzy and legal wrangling. My name was everywhere, and the pressure was suffocating. Zarya's name was starting to surface too, the whispers had already begun. I knew that once this case went to court, everything would change. Zarya's past, the evidence, the truth, it would all be laid bare for the world to see. The lie I had been living for so many years would be exposed, and I couldn't protect her anymore. But the hardest part? The hardest part was knowing I was doing this to protect her. Because the truth was the only thing that could set us free. The air in the courthouse was thick with tension. The media was already camped out in front, their cameras poised and waiting for the first glimpse of the story unfolding. I was standing at the edge of something I could never come back from. I was about to face the truth, not just for myself, but for Zarya too. And I had no idea if we would ever be able to pick up the pieces afterward. Jayla stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder, offering a quiet kind of support that was both comforting and unsettling. The trial was about to begin, and everything was on the line. "Ready?" she asked, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of hesitation. I nodded, though the weight of the decision pressed heavily on my chest. This was it. No turning back. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Lawyers shuffled papers, witnesses were escorted to their seats, and the judge's gavel was poised to begin the chaos. As I sat there, I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The prosecutor's voice echoed in the courtroom, but it felt distant, muffled. My focus was on the door through which Zarya would walk if she chose to face this head-on. I couldn't stop thinking about her. What would she do? Would she testify? Would she deny everything and make me the villain of this story once again? But in my heart, I already knew what was going to happen. Zarya wasn't going to come forward. She wouldn't admit to anything. She would do everything in her power to keep the truth buried, and I would be left holding the pieces of her lies. I wasn't ready for that. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor was sharp, painting me as the unfortunate pawn in a game I had never wanted to play. He spoke about the day of the murder like it was an open-and-shut case, and that stung more than I expected. On the other side, my defense team, led by Jayla, was making their case for the wrongful conviction. The evidence was there. The new witnesses. The police misconduct. But no matter how much they presented, the truth about Zarya was hanging over us like a storm cloud, waiting to break. And then came the moment I had been dreading. The prosecutor stood up, his voice filled with disdain as he turned to address the jury. "There is a reason this woman was convicted, Your Honor," he said, his gaze shifting to me. "She is guilty. She may try to paint herself as the victim, but the facts do not lie. The victim's blood is on her hands. I flinched, my stomach dropping. He was trying to bury me under the weight of my own past, dragging out everything they had used to convict me. But the real bombshell was coming. I knew it, and so did Jayla. The defense called their first witness, the homeless man. His testimony was the key to everything. The man who had witnessed someone, a woman in a red hoodie, leaving the scene with the gun in her hand. It wasn't me. Zarya had been the one there that night. The thought was suffocating. As much as I wanted to push it away, I couldn't. His testimony wasn't enough to sway the jury, but it was enough to open the door. Jayla stood, her voice steady, as she presented the next set of evidence, the photograph of Zarya with Detective Blake, the shady connection between them. It was a moment of revelation, one that was sure to shake the foundation of everything. Your Honor, Jayla said, her eyes never leaving the prosecutor, there are hidden ties here. The involvement of an officer who may have been complicit in framing my client is not something we take lightly. The prosecutor tried to dismiss it, but the damage was done. The judge called for a short recess, and I was left standing in the middle of a storm, wondering if this would all come crashing down. During the break, I stayed in the courtroom, my hands shaking as I tried to hold myself together. Jayla came up to me, her expression hard but focused. Imani, we're getting somewhere, she said quietly, scanning the room for anyone who might overhear. This is our chance. We need to keep the pressure on. I know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how much longer I can do this. Zarya, she's still hiding. She's still protecting herself. Jayla took a deep breath, sitting beside me. I get it. But you've made it this far, and you've got more strength than you realize. The truth is on our side. Now we just have to wait for it to come out. I glanced over at the door again. Zarya was still nowhere to be found. The hope I had been clinging to, that maybe she would finally come forward, was starting to slip away. The trial resumed, and the next witness was called. It was someone I hadn't expected to see, Detective Blake. He walked in, a smug look on his face, like he was about to win this case for the prosecution. But there was something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. He wasn't just a witness, he was involved. When he took the stand, he spoke with the kind of confidence that made me want to scream. He spoke about the investigation, how everything had pointed to me, how I had manipulated the situation. He made it sound like I was the mastermind behind everything. I could feel the jury's eyes on me, their gazes cold and judgmental. The weight of his words was suffocating, but something inside me snapped. I couldn't let him lie about me anymore. I stood up suddenly, my heart pounding in my chest. I have to say something, I said, my voice shaking but determined. The room went silent. The judge looked at me, his eyes narrowing. I'm not the one who should be sitting here, I continued, taking a deep breath. Zarya Franklin, my sister, was the one involved in the crime. She's the one who should be standing trial, not me. I'm not going to keep protecting her. The courtroom erupted into chaos, the shock on everyone's face mirrored the turmoil inside me. I had finally said it out loud, Zarya was the one who had betrayed me. Zarya was the one who had allowed me to suffer for something I didn't do. But would it be enough? Would the truth finally be enough to set me free? The silence in the courtroom after I spoke felt like an eternity. The air was heavy, thick with disbelief. I had just named my sister as the true perpetrator of the crime I'd been convicted of. The words had tumbled out of me, raw and real, before I had even fully processed their weight. I could feel the eyes of every person in the room on me, the jury, the prosecutor, my defense team. But none of their gazes were more piercing than the one I was avoiding. Zarya. She was nowhere to be seen. She hadn't come to the courthouse today, and I had no idea whether that was intentional or a consequence of what I had just done. The judge banged his gavel, snapping me back to the present. Order in the court, he barked, his voice firm and commanding. Ms. Franklin, you will sit down and allow the defense to continue. I sank into my chair, my mind still spinning. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like I had opened a door to a nightmare that I couldn't shut. Jayla leaned toward me, her voice low but urgent. Imani, you did the right thing. You spoke your truth. It's going to make a difference. But as the words left her mouth, I couldn't bring myself to believe them. What had I really done? I had just torn apart the only family I had left. The only person who had ever been my constant. Zarya and I had shared so much, our childhood, our dreams, our fears. And now, it felt like those memories had been tainted by the actions she had taken. The trial continued. The prosecutor was reeling from the bombshell I'd dropped, trying to regain control, but there was no denying what had been revealed. I wasn't the only one who had seen the shift in the room. The jury was on edge. The defense team had a new sense of momentum, but it was fragile. Zarya didn't show up for the rest of the trial. Her absence felt like a weight on my shoulders. She was hiding, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. The truth had a way of forcing people into the light. And it was clear that, for better or worse, I had just put Zarya in a position where she could no longer remain in the shadows. The next day, Jayla and I were alone in the defense office, poring over the evidence one last time before we went back to court. I could hear the distant sounds of the courthouse, the murmurs of reporters trying to get statements, the clicking of camera shutters. Imani, Jayla said, breaking my thoughts, I know this is hard. But you need to be ready for what comes next. Zarya's not going to just let this go. She'll fight back. She'll try to make it look like you're the one who's betraying her. I nodded, though the idea of Zarya doing anything to make herself the victim again made my stomach churn. I don't care, I muttered. I don't care what she does anymore. I just want the truth to come out. I want everyone to know what happened, to understand why I did what I did. Jayla placed a hand on my shoulder, her expression softening. You're not the only one who's been hurt, Imani. But what you did, what you're doing now, that's about justice. It's not about Zarya anymore. It's about you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my head when I had spoken the words aloud in court. Zarya Franklin was the one who did it. I hadn't expected it to feel like this. It wasn't just about justice for the victim anymore. It was about the loss of a sister, the unraveling of everything I had once believed about her, about family. Zarya had made me pay for a crime I didn't commit, but she hadn't just taken my freedom. She had stolen my trust, my love, and the future I thought we would share. The phone rang in the middle of the night, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't even check the caller ID, I knew who it was. Imani, Zarya's voice was shaky, cracking with emotion, but there was no denying the coldness beneath it. You did it. You really went through with it. You told them everything. I couldn't keep lying for you, Zarya. Not anymore. There was silence on the other end, and for a long moment, I thought she might hang up. But when she spoke again, her words were softer, almost like she was speaking to herself. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted it to go this far. You made it go this far, I said quietly. You chose to leave me in prison. You chose to stay silent while I took the fall. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. I thought if I just kept quiet, everything would go away. But now. The words trailed off, and I could feel the weight of her regret through the phone line. But now, you'll have to face it, I said. We both will. The trial continued the next day, but something was different. The prosecutor, who had been so confident before, now seemed uncertain, hesitant. He tried to discredit the evidence that had been brought forth, the photograph of Zarya with Detective Blake, the witness testimonies, but it was clear that the story had shifted. The truth couldn't be ignored any longer. But Zarya was still hiding. She hadn't taken the stand. She wasn't there to defend herself or confront the truth. It wasn't until late in the afternoon, after hours of back and forth, that Zaria's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, voice steady but strained. "My client has decided to speak." I held my breath, waiting. And then, through the door, Zaria walked in. She was dressed in black, her expression unreadable. She didn't look at me as she made her way to the witness stand. She didn't look at anyone. She was finally ready to face the music. But the question now was, would she tell the truth, or would she turn the tide back in her favor? The room fell deathly silent as Zaria walked to the witness stand. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the tense air. She kept her eyes straight ahead, not sparing a glance toward me. Not even a flicker of recognition, of guilt, or perhaps, of the weight she had been carrying all these years. Her lawyer positioned her at the stand, but it wasn't the questions that would make or break the trial. It was what she chose to say. Zaria sat there, her back straight, her face a mask of calm. But inside, I knew she was anything but at peace. She was unraveling. She had to be. After all, how could she not be? How could anyone hold all that guilt, all those lies, and not break? The prosecutor stood, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Ms. Franklin," he began, his tone calculated. "You've been called here today to testify in this trial. You are aware of the charges against your sister, Imani Franklin, and the accusations she has made. The question we must ask now is simple: do you stand by your sister's claim, that you were the one responsible for the crime?" Zaria didn't speak at first. The air seemed to thicken as she seemed to consider the question, or perhaps she was considering something else entirely. Her eyes flicked briefly toward me, but the moment was fleeting. A passing glance, one filled with more questions than answers. "No," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "I did not commit the crime." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and my heart sank. I didn't know what I had expected, but this wasn't it. The door I had opened, the truth I had revealed, it felt like it was closing in on me now. The prosecutor seemed unfazed. He pressed on, not giving her a moment to breathe. "So, what do you have to say about the evidence brought forward by the defense? The photograph with Detective Blake? The witness who identified you at the scene? Are these fabrications?" Zaria stiffened. Her eyes flickered toward her lawyer, who gave her a subtle nod. She hesitated, and for a brief moment, I thought she might finally tell the truth. The truth that would free me and set the record straight. The truth that had been buried for so long. But then Zaria took a breath, and everything shifted. "Everything that's been presented here," she said, her voice gaining confidence, "is a distortion of the facts. I wasn't there. I don't know what these people are claiming, but they're wrong. I am not guilty." I felt like the ground was pulled out from under me. The words hit harder than anything I had expected. She was doing it. She was turning the tables. She was making herself the victim. I watched as the prosecutor leaned forward, sensing his opportunity. "You're denying your involvement in the murder?" he asked, almost too eager. "You're denying the part you played in framing your sister for something she didn't do?" Zaria's face remained unreadable, but I could see the cracks. Her jaw tightened, her hands clenched around the edges of the witness stand. She was barely holding it together. I'm denying that," she said, her voice wavering for just a second. But it was enough for me to see the truth that was lurking beneath her lies. She was scared. She was panicking. I had always known her. And now, I knew this: Zaria wasn't going to own up to what she had done. Not in that courtroom. Not today. I stood up from my seat, my heart racing as the words came rushing to my mouth before I could stop them. "She's lying!" I shouted, the words burning in my throat. "Zaria, stop this. You know what you did. You know it was you." The room erupted into chaos, the judge banging his gavel furiously to restore order. But I didn't care. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My own sister, the person I had loved and trusted, was sitting there, making it all about herself. The judge called for a recess, and I was escorted out of the courtroom by security. My mind was reeling, spinning with disbelief. How could Zarya do this? How could she deny everything, make it all about her own survival? Jayla rushed over to me as I sat in the hallway, my head buried in my hands. She had known something like this could happen, but even she looked shaken. I didn't think she'd go that far, she said, her voice low. She's pushing her limits, Imani. But you've already said the truth. You can't take it back. But she's still getting away with it. I said, standing up and pacing. She's still making me the villain. I'm going to end up in prison again. All this for nothing. You didn't do this for nothing, Jayla said, her eyes steady and unwavering. You did this because it was right. Because no matter what happens, you told the truth. And now, it's Zarya's turn to face what she's done. As the recess ended, I returned to the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest. Zarya was still sitting at the witness stand, but now, there was something different in the air. Something shifted in me, too. Zarya hadn't spoken the truth, not yet, at least. But I couldn't let her bury me under this lie any longer. I knew the truth would come out, even if she fought against it with every breath she had. And so, as Zarya's lawyer tried to regain control, something inside me made a decision. I would not sit back and let her destroy me. I couldn't let her. The truth was already out. But it was time for me to make my final stand. There are moments in life when you reach the breaking point. You can either collapse under the pressure, or you can break through it and finally rise. The air was thick as I returned to the courtroom. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest that it felt like the walls were vibrating. Zarya was still sitting in the witness stand, her posture rigid, her face an unreadable mask of composure. She wasn't looking at me, not now, not after everything. But I was done. Done pretending that she wasn't the one who had put me in this position. Done pretending I didn't know what she had done. And most importantly, I was done pretending that her lies could hold me captive any longer. I glanced over at Jayla, who gave me a nod of encouragement. You've got this, Imani, she whispered. The truth is on your side. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. It was no longer just about the trial, or even about Zarya's betrayal. This was about my own freedom, and the freedom of anyone who had ever been wrongly accused. The prosecutor stood, addressing the judge with a level of intensity one hadn't seen before. Your Honor, I request that we call for a recess so that my client can gather more evidence against the defendant. I stood up. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. If the defense has no further evidence to present, I would like to speak. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Ms. Franklin, you have already made your statement. You've had your chance. Are you sure this is necessary? I nodded. Yes. It is. The judge hesitated for a moment before nodding. Very well. You may speak. I walked toward the witness stand, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Every step was a battle to keep my composure. Zarya's eyes flicked to me, but I didn't look at her. Not anymore. I took my place and stared straight ahead. For a moment, the room was utterly silent, every eye fixed on me. The tension was unbearable. But I couldn't back down now. I want to speak the truth, I began, my voice carrying across the room. The whole truth. No more lies. No more pretending. Zarya knows what she did to me. She knows that she set me up. And she knows that I took the fall for something that she did. I paused, letting my words sink in. The shock in the courtroom was palpable. Zarya's lawyer stood up immediately, protesting, but the judge silenced him with a wave of his hand. Ms. Franklin, the judge said, his tone still calm but firm. If you have something to say, say it. But know that your words have consequences. I understand, Your Honor, I said, my heart pounding. But I was beyond caring. I was beyond fear. I had carried the weight of my sister's betrayal for too long. It was time for her to carry the truth. I am not guilty, I continued, and Zarya knows it. She's the one who committed the crime. She's the one who framed me. And she's the one who has been hiding behind her lies this whole time. Zarya stood abruptly from her seat. This is not how it happened, Imani, she shouted, her voice breaking. The courtroom gasped, but Zarya wasn't done. You don't get to turn this around. You don't get to accuse me when it's you who's been running away from the truth. The courtroom was in chaos again. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding order. But my words had already cracked open the dam. There was no going back. I turned to face Zarya for the first time in days. You don't get to lie anymore, I said, my voice cold. Not to me, not to anyone. I know the truth, Zarya. We both do. And I'm done covering for you. For the first time since this all began, Zarya's facade started to crumble. Her lips trembled, and she took a step backward, her breath shallow. The lies were still there, they were all she had left to hold on to. But her eyes betrayed her. There was fear in them. There was guilt. Zarya, I said, my voice trembling despite my determination, do you know what it feels like to lose everything? To watch your life fall apart because someone you love chose to destroy you. To take your future, your freedom, and your hope, and just throw it away for nothing. Her eyes darted around the courtroom, as if looking for a way out. But there was no escape anymore. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Imani, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I let you take the fall, everything would be okay. But I couldn't. The confession was soft, but it was enough. Enough to crack the foundation of all the lies. Enough to make everything she had done come into sharp focus. I took a step forward, the words coming easier now. You chose to let me rot in prison, Zarya. You chose to let me suffer for something you did. And now, you have to face the consequences. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Zarya's shoulders slumped as if the weight of her own guilt had become too much to bear. She looked at me, for the first time in years, really looked at me, and I saw the truth in her eyes. The truth I had always hoped for, but never expected. I'm sorry, Imani, she whispered. The words weren't enough. They would never be enough. But for the first time, I knew she understood. The judge called for order once more, but the damage had already been done. Zarya had broken down. The truth was out. The lies had crumbled. As the trial continued, Zarya's confession weighed heavily on the proceedings. Her defense lawyer, unable to counter her own admission, shifted gears, hoping to reduce her sentence. But no one was fooled. The truth was inescapable now. When the jury returned with their verdict, it was clear. I was free. Zarya, however, would face the consequences of her actions. But as the gavel rang out, the room was filled with an eerie sense of finality. It wasn't over, not for either of us. The scars would remain. And yet, somehow, I felt lighter. The weight that had crushed me for so long had finally been lifted. And with it, I realized one truth above all, I was free. Even after the storm has passed, the damage remains. Rebuilding takes time, and some wounds never truly heal. The days following the trial were a blur. The chaos of the courtroom, the emotional upheaval, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal slowly gave way to a strange silence. My life, the life I had spent so many years trying to piece back together, was now finally mine again. But nothing felt the same. There was no celebration. No relief. Just the hollow emptiness of realizing that my sister, the one person who was supposed to understand me the most, had betrayed me in ways I could never have imagined. Zaria's sentencing came quickly. The judge had been clear, she was guilty. She would face a lengthy sentence for the crime she had committed, the crime she had framed me for. But knowing that didn't bring me any peace. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't angry either. I was just numb. I spent the first few weeks after the trial in a haze, trying to find my footing in a world that had been shattered and then rebuilt in ways I hadn't asked for. I moved back into my old apartment, the one I had before everything fell apart. The walls were the same, but they felt foreign now. Everything felt like it had changed, even though I hadn't left. Jayla was there for me, as she always had been. She helped me sort through the mess, both the physical one, in terms of the boxes and bags I had yet to unpack, and the emotional one, the one that threatened to swallow me whole. She was the one who made sure I ate, made sure I rested, made sure I wasn't lost in my own head. Take it one day at a time, she'd say whenever I began to spiral. You're not alone. You have me. And I knew that she was right. But even with Jayla by my side, there were moments I couldn't escape the feeling that my life had been hijacked, that nothing I had worked for was ever truly mine. Zaria was in jail, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to feel about that. Part of me wanted to feel angry. To feel betrayed, to lash out at her for everything she had put me through. Part of me wanted her to rot in prison, to pay for the years she had stolen from me. But then there were moments when I felt a deep, unsettling sympathy. I couldn't help but wonder if she had done this out of desperation, if the pressure had driven her to make the worst decision of her life. Was it just fear? Guilt? Did she ever truly understand the consequences of her actions? I had no answers, and the truth was, I didn't know if I ever would. One evening, a few weeks after the trial, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at the reflection staring back at me. The face was mine, but the eyes were different. The person looking back at me was someone who had seen too much, lost too much. Someone who wasn't sure who she was anymore. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Jayla. Jayla, you good? I'm coming over in a bit. We need to talk about what's next. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I hadn't really thought about what was next. I hadn't allowed myself to. But maybe it was time. Time to stop hiding, to stop mourning what I couldn't change. It was time to face the future, no matter how uncertain it was. I typed back, okay. See you soon. Jayla arrived not long after, her usual energy filling the space as she walked in. I could see the concern in her eyes, but she didn't push me to talk. Not yet. I brought pizza, she said with a smile, holding up a box. You need to eat something. I smiled weakly. Thanks, Jayla. You're the only one who's kept me grounded through all of this. We sat down together, the pizza between us untouched at first. The silence between us was comfortable, like we both understood that neither of us had the answers. But Jayla was patient. I could always count on her to be that way. Finally, she spoke. So, what now? I let out a slow breath, unsure of how to answer. I don't know. I've been trying to think about it, but every time I do, it feels like I'm facing a wall. I'm free, Jayla. But everything I thought I had before is gone. I'm not the same person I was before, and I'm not sure who I am now. You don't have to know all the answers right away, Jayla said softly. But you do know one thing, right? I looked at her, confused. What? That you've survived this. You're still standing. That's more than most people can say after what you've been through. I nodded, but the words didn't bring me the comfort I wanted. I had survived, yes. But surviving wasn't enough. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to feel whole again. There's still a lot of rebuilding to do, I said quietly. And I don't know if I can do it on my own. You won't be alone, Jayla replied, her voice firm. I'll be here, no matter what. But I think you need to talk to someone else, too. I looked at her, uncertain. Who? Your mom, she said simply. You've been avoiding her, I know. But maybe it's time to stop running. The idea of facing my mother was a hard pill to swallow. After everything that had happened, I had distanced myself from her, from everyone, really. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront the past, especially the part of it that still stung the most. But as the days passed, I realized Jayla was right. The first step to moving forward was healing those wounds. And that meant opening up the doors I had slammed shut. The phone call to my mom came late one night, after I had spent hours wrestling with my thoughts. I couldn't put it off any longer. Hello? Her voice cracked with surprise, but I could hear the relief in it too. Mom, I said, my voice trembling. I need to talk to you. The hardest part of healing is acknowledging the scars you've spent years trying to forget. Sometimes, the ones who should understand you the most, don't. The phone call to my mom had been nothing like I imagined. It had been tentative, uncertain, as if the words I needed to say had been trapped somewhere deep inside me. But when she had answered, I knew I couldn't back out. Not this time. I sat on my couch, staring at the phone in my hand, heart racing as I waited for her response. After a long, tense pause, her voice broke the silence. Imani, sweetheart, it's been so long. I wasn't sure if you'd ever call again. Her words hung in the air, an apology and a plea all rolled into one. And it hit me harder than I expected. I had shut her out, for good reason, of course. But hearing the pain in her voice made me wonder, had I been fair? Mom, I began, my voice soft, unsure. I'm sorry. I should have called sooner. No, sweetheart, she said quickly, almost urgently. I should have called you. I should have been there for you. I know I failed you, and I'm sorry. I blinked back the sudden rush of emotions. We both failed each other, I replied, the bitterness in my voice almost surprising me. But I don't know if I can just, let it go, Mom. Not after everything that's happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel her processing my words. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quieter. Imani, I know what you've been through, and I know it's been hard. You're right to feel the way you do. But I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. And I never meant to hurt you. But I failed you in ways I can't even begin to explain. Her words were full of regret, but they didn't erase the years of hurt that had built up between us. Still, I couldn't deny that hearing her admit her mistakes felt like a small step toward reconciliation. But was it enough? I'm not sure if I can forgive you right now, I said honestly. I'm not sure I know how. I understand, she replied. But I hope, in time, we can work through this. I know it'll take time. But I'm here, Imani. Whenever you're ready. The words didn't offer immediate relief, but they did something that felt like a crack in the wall I had built around myself. I wasn't ready to forgive her. But I wasn't ready to shut her out completely, either. I'll think about it, Mom, I said, my voice quieter now. But I'm not ready to pretend everything's fine. Not yet. She didn't argue. I'll wait. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Mom. And with that, I ended the call, staring at my phone for a moment before placing it down beside me. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting on that conversation more than I expected. The rawness of my mom's apology, the weight of my own emotions, they kept circling in my mind, refusing to settle. Could I really rebuild this relationship? Could we heal after everything we had been through? It wasn't easy. It wasn't even close to easy. There were moments when I wanted to call her, to pick up the phone and continue the conversation, to try and mend what was broken. But there were also moments when I wanted to slam the door shut again, when the weight of the betrayal and hurt was too much to bear. The idea of forgiving her, of allowing her back into my life in any real way, felt like too much. The pain of my sister's betrayal was still so fresh, and the idea of trusting anyone again, even my mom, felt like a betrayal to myself. But I also knew that if I didn't try, if I didn't take this first step, I would never heal. I would never move forward. That week, I decided to visit the prison where Zarya was being held. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but it was something I needed to do. Not for her, not for anyone else. But for me. To face the truth. To face the person who had turned my world upside down and to finally speak the words I had been carrying for so long. Jayla offered to come with me, but I refused. This was something I had to do alone. When I arrived at the prison, I felt a wave of cold dread wash over me. I had been here before, visiting Zarya when things were normal, when she wasn't the person who had betrayed me. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, walking through the metal detectors, the sterile, lifeless halls, I felt a cold emptiness settling over me. When they brought Zarya into the visitation room, she looked different. She had lost weight, her skin was pale, and her eyes, once so full of confidence and arrogance, now looked broken. But there was still that familiar bitterness in her gaze. She sat down across from me, her hands trembling. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt thick, suffocating. I could feel the weight of everything that had transpired between us, but there was no easy way to navigate it. Finally, she spoke. "You're here," she said, her voice shaky. "I didn't think you would be." "I didn't want to be," I said flatly. "But here I am." Zarya swallowed hard. "Imani, I don't know what to say. I know I can't make it right. I can't take back what I did. But I want you to know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know how to respond. I had wanted her to say those words, to own her actions. But hearing them now, they didn't fix anything. They didn't change what had happened. Sorry isn't enough, Zarya, I said softly. Not for what you did. Her face twisted in pain. I know. I know it's not. But I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't know how to fix it. I was scared. I know you were scared, I replied, my voice softer now. But I couldn't just be your scapegoat. You took everything from me. Zarya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't wipe them away. She just let them fall. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me. But please know. I would take it all back if I could. I stared at her, at the sister who had once been my best friend, my ally, and now felt like a stranger. I can't forgive you yet, Zarya. But I'll never forget you. Not for what you did to me. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I understand. As I left the prison, I felt no sense of closure. The wound was still raw, the scars still too fresh. But at least I had said what needed to be said. I had faced my sister, and in some way, that was a step forward. Healing is never linear. Some days, you feel like you've made progress. Other days, it feels like you're walking backward. But as long as you keep moving forward, no matter how slow, you'll get there eventually. In the weeks that followed my visit to the prison, I found myself caught between two worlds. There were moments when I felt like I was finally starting to rebuild my life, like I could see a future beyond the wreckage of the past. But then there were the moments when everything came crashing back, when I would hear a song that reminded me of Zarya, or when I saw something in the news that made me think of how easily my life could have been destroyed. Some days, I felt strong. Other days, I felt like I was being crushed by the weight of everything I had lost. It was as if every step forward had to be earned, like I couldn't simply decide to heal, I had to work for it. And some days, it felt like too much. Jayla was still by my side, offering her unwavering support, but even she could see how exhausted I was from carrying the emotional baggage of the past. Every time I would start to feel a little bit lighter, a little bit more hopeful, something would pull me back into the darkness. "I'm worried about you," Jayla said one night as we sat on the couch, eating takeout and watching TV. "You're pushing yourself too hard. You can't rush healing." "I'm not rushing it," I replied, my voice distant. "But I just want it to be over. I want to feel like myself again." "You will," Jayla said, her tone soft but firm. "But it's going to take time. You have to give yourself permission to not be okay for a while. You've been through hell, Imani. You can't just wake up one day and be fine." I nodded, but it was hard to believe her. Sometimes, I wondered if I would ever feel like I was truly fine again. The girl I had been, the one who was full of dreams and hope, felt so far away, as if she had lived in a different lifetime. I couldn't imagine being that person again, not after everything I had endured. One afternoon, a few weeks after the prison visit, I decided to go for a walk through the city. I needed to clear my head, to escape the confines of my apartment and the weight of the past for a little while. As I walked down the familiar streets, I realized just how much had changed. The city, with its tall buildings and busy sidewalks, felt like a different world. I wasn't sure if I had changed or if the world itself had, but either way, I didn't feel like I belonged in it anymore. It was on one of those walks that I ran into Marcus. It had been months since we last spoke. After the trial, I had pulled away from him, unsure of how to face someone who had always been there for me, but had also been part of the painful journey that had led to Zaria's betrayal. I had told myself that I needed space to heal, and that meant distancing myself from anyone who could remind me of the pain. But when I saw him on the corner of the street, leaning against a lamppost, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of surprise and relief, I felt a sudden rush of emotions. Seeing him felt like a breath of fresh air, but it also felt like stepping into something unfamiliar. "Imani," he said softly, taking a step toward me. "I didn't expect to see you out here." I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. The last time I had seen Marcus, I had been angry, bitter, and unsure of who I could trust. But now, everything felt different. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel, or if there was any way to go back to the way things had been before. "I didn't expect to be out here either," I said with a small smile, my voice a little shaky. He took another step forward, hesitating. "Can we talk? I know things have been complicated, but I don't want to just walk away without at least saying something." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I had so many unresolved feelings toward Marcus, feelings of gratitude, resentment, and confusion. But I also knew that avoiding him wasn't helping either of us. It was time to face the parts of my past that I had been running from. "Okay," I said finally, my voice steady. "Let's talk." We sat down at a nearby cafe, the tension between us palpable as we stared at each other, unsure of where to start. It was like the elephant in the room, the betrayal, the loss, the hurt, all of it was still there, hanging heavy in the air. Marcus spoke first. "I'm sorry, Imani. For everything. I should have been there more for you. I should have fought harder for you." I swallowed, the sting of his words cutting deeper than I expected. "It's not just about you, Marcus. It's about everything. I thought I knew who I could trust, and then, everything was turned upside down. I don't know if I'll ever understand why Zaria did what she did." "Neither do I," he said, his voice raw. "I wish I could have stopped it, but I couldn't. I felt so powerless, watching you go through that." I nodded, understanding his helplessness. But the truth was, I had felt just as powerless. And that feeling, that sense of losing control, was the hardest part to live with. "I don't know what to do with any of this," I confessed, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to move forward." He reached across the table, his hand hovering for a moment before he placed it gently on mine. "You don't have to do it alone, Imani. You have me. I'm not going anywhere." The sincerity in his voice made my heart ache. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was telling the truth. But I had been burned before. And trusting again, opening myself up to someone, felt like a dangerous game. I'm not sure I can trust anyone right now, I admitted quietly. I'm still trying to figure out who I am in all of this. Marcus nodded, his expression softening. I get that. I'm not asking you to rush anything. But I'm here when you're ready. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, the weight of the conversation with Marcus settling heavily on my chest. I wasn't ready to make any decisions. But I realized something important: I couldn't keep running from my past. Healing meant accepting what had happened, even if it didn't make sense. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to rebuild the trust one had lost, not just with others, but with myself. The road ahead was still unclear. The pain was still fresh. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there might be a way forward. One step at a time. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't moving on from the past. It's learning to accept it, to let it shape you, and still find the strength to move forward. I woke up early that morning, the sunlight creeping through the blinds, casting soft shadows on the walls of my apartment. It was a peaceful morning, the kind I hadn't had in months. It was the kind of morning that made me feel like I had a second chance, like everything was still possible, even though the past had already tried to break me. As I sat up in bed, I noticed the familiar, comforting hum of the city outside my window, the cars, the people, the life moving on without me, or maybe alongside me. The truth was, I didn't know where I stood anymore. But today, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. The road had been long. It had been painful. And it still wasn't over. But I had come so far, further than I ever thought I would. The pieces of myself I thought I had lost, the parts of me that were kind, strong, hopeful, they were still there, buried under the layers of anger, grief, and betrayal. And slowly, I was uncovering them again. I had spent so much time trying to figure out what went wrong, trying to find the answers in everyone else's mistakes, in their betrayals. But the truth was, healing came not from fixing the past, but from understanding it, accepting it. I couldn't change the way things had gone, and I couldn't change the people who had hurt me. But I could change how I reacted. I could choose to move forward. I picked up my phone and saw a message from Jayla. "Hey, Imani. How are you feeling today?" I smiled and typed back, "Better. A lot better. I think I'm ready to face whatever comes next." It had taken time, but I had come to understand something important: healing wasn't about rushing to get back to normal. It was about finding peace with the pain, about accepting that I had been hurt, and realizing that it didn't have to define me. That afternoon, I went to the courthouse. Not to seek revenge, not to punish anyone, but to close the door on the chapter that had been my past. It was time for me to walk away from the person I had been when I was drowning in anger and grief. I had been trapped in that anger for so long, letting it control me, letting it decide who I was. But now, I was ready to leave it behind. I didn't expect to see Zaria again. Not like this. But when I entered the courtroom, I was greeted by her lawyer, the one who had worked tirelessly to help me clear my name, and the prosecutor who had once tried to tear me down. They both stood before me, waiting for me to say something. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. But as I stood there, the weight of everything I had been through came rushing back. The wrongful conviction, the betrayal, the way my life had been turned upside down. It all felt like it had happened to someone else. "Imani," the prosecutor said, her voice stiff. "I want to apologize for everything that happened. I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that I regret the way things went down." I nodded, but my heart didn't ache the way it used to when I thought of all the injustices. It didn't hurt as much anymore. It was a scar, still there, but not as deep. "I appreciate the apology," I said quietly. "But I'm not here for that. I'm here to move forward. And I'm done letting the past hold me back." Later that day, I met Marcus again. He was waiting for me at a park near my apartment, sitting on a bench under a large oak tree. When he saw me, his face lit up, and I couldn't help but smile in return. It felt good to see him, to feel like maybe there was still hope in this broken world. "You look like you've made peace with something," he said with a grin. "I have," I replied, sitting beside him. "I've made peace with everything. The past, the hurt, the anger, it's all part of me, but it doesn't define me anymore." "I'm proud of you," he said, his eyes sincere. "You're stronger than I ever thought." "I'm not sure about that," I said, shaking my head. "But I am different. I'm not who I was." Marcus didn't say anything for a moment, just watching me with that look in his eyes that made me feel like he saw me, really saw me, for who I was, not just the woman who had been hurt. "You've come so far," he finally said. "And I'm glad you're letting yourself move forward." I smiled, feeling a sense of calm that had eluded me for so long. "Thank you, Marcus. For being patient. For being here." "You don't have to thank me for that," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." I didn't know where the future would lead. There was still so much unknown, so much I had yet to figure out. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I had learned that the only way to move forward was to embrace it, with all its uncertainties and challenges. The truth was, I would never forget what happened to me. The scars would always be there, a reminder of the pain and the journey. But they weren't a prison. They were a testament to my strength, to my resilience. The past had tried to break me. But it hadn't. That evening, I went home, feeling a quiet peace settle over me. I wasn't completely healed. I wasn't fixed. But I was whole again. I was no longer the woman who had been lost in anger and revenge. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. And maybe that was enough. Life may push us into unexpected challenges, but it's those very wounds that help us grow. The price we pay for healing may be high, but it teaches us how to find strength in ourselves. Imani stood by the lake, her eyes gazing far away, where the sun was slowly setting, casting golden rays on the water's surface. The peaceful feeling washed over her soul, even though behind her was a past full of hurt and loss. What she had been through had never been easy, but now, Imani knew that even though the past had tried to break her, it was still a part of who she was. Since leaving the courthouse, Imani's life had gradually returned to a normal rhythm, but it wasn't the same as before. She was no longer the naive girl full of hope. Imani had learned to live with acceptance, to face the wounds without letting them define who she was. What she had gone through had never been easy, but now, Imani understood that healing wasn't about fixing the past, it was about understanding it. Accepting it. The scars weren't just marks of what had been lost, they were symbols of strength, of survival. There were moments like this, in the quiet, when Imani truly understood that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. She didn't need to be perfect, and sometimes, it was precisely that imperfection that helped her rediscover her true value. She turned around and saw Marcus approaching, his familiar smile on his face. He was still the one person she could rely on, especially in the hardest of times, and the most important thing was that he had never left her side through all the pain. "Imani, are you ready?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with concern and love. Imani smiled softly, her eyes radiating peace. "I'm ready now. I'm ready to stop looking back." They stood there in silence, watching the surroundings. No more words were needed, for both knew that sometimes, the most important thing was simply being together in quiet companionship. Imani felt a profound shift within herself. The painful days had passed, and although they hadn't been easy, they had made her who she was today. She had learned that life may not always be fair, but what mattered was how you faced it. She was no longer a victim of circumstance, she was the one in control of her life. The healing process had been long and challenging, but as Imani stood in that moment, she realized that she had found a way to move on. The past might still have a hold on her, but it would never define her again. The scars were there, but they were part of her story, a story of resilience and strength. Imani, Marcus said, his voice gentle. You've come so far. I have, she replied, her voice steady. But the real journey begins now. They smiled at each other, and for the first time in a long while, Imani didn't feel burdened by her past. The weight of it was still there, but it was manageable now. It was just a chapter in her story, not the entire book. As they walked side by side, Imani felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. There was still a lot ahead of her. The future was still uncertain, and there would be more struggles. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She knew she could handle whatever came next. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't fixed. But she was whole again. She wasn't the woman who had been drowning in anger and revenge. She was someone stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. And maybe that was enough. Imani had learned that life didn't always go as planned. It didn't always give you the happy ending you expected. But it was her choice to move forward, to find hope, to love herself again, and to create a future she could be proud of. In the end, it wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, and still finding joy in life. With Marcus by her side and a life full of potential ahead, Imani felt ready to face the future with a new sense of purpose. She would no longer let the past define her. She had learned to forgive, not just others, but herself as well. She wasn't who she used to be. But she was someone who had survived, and in surviving, she had found something precious, hope. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?